Good evening, everybody. Pastor Vaughn here, Pastor Daniel. We hope you're having a blessed Holy Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us. This is we're continuing our devotions that we've been doing throughout all Holy Week. We hope that you have seen those, been blessed by those. If you've missed them, go to our Facebook page, click videos, and there's a playlist that'll have all those. And be sure to tune in tomorrow, Friday, Saturday. We'll have more devotionals following Jesus' activity in the most important week in history. And make sure, we mention it every time, you grab our Holy Week guide that has scripture readings, has family questions that you can gather around the table and ask concerning what you've read, coloring pages you can print off for the kids. Make sure you grab that pinned at the top of our Facebook page. You can go to fbccordeal.com, and in the menu at the top, you can find it there as well. And of course, make sure you join us Sunday live, 10 a.m. sharp, for our Easter services. And share, like, comment, and spread the word about those services, and see if we could get the numbers up to spread Christ's good news of resurrection throughout your Facebook pages. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Pastor Danny. He's going to sing us a couple songs, and then we'll dive back into Mark.
Come, let us worship our King. Come, let us bow at His feet. He has done great things. See what our Savior has done. See how His love overcomes. He has done great things. He has done great things. Oh, hero of heaven, you conquered the grave. You free every captive, you break every chain. Oh God, you have done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive. Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high. Oh God, you have done great things. You've been faithful through every storm. You'll be faithful forevermore. You have done great things, and I know you will do it again. For your promise is yes and amen. You will do great things. God, you do great things. Oh, hero of heaven, you conquered the grave. You free every captive, you break every chain. Oh God, you have done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high. Oh God, you have done great things. Hallelujah, God, above it all. Hallelujah, God, unshakable. Hallelujah, you have done great things. Hallelujah, God, above it all. Hallelujah, God, unshakable. Hallelujah, you have done great things. Oh, hero of heaven, you conquered the grave. You free as I rise. Strength of God, go before, lift me up as I wake. Eyes of God, look upon, be my side. As I wait, heart of God, satisfy and sustain. As I hear voice of God, lead me on, be my guide, be my guide, above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me, above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me. And as I go, hand of God, my defense, by my side, as I rest, breath of God, fall upon, bring me peace, bring me peace, above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me, above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me. Oh, 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 Christ be all around me. Your life, your death, your blood was shed for every moment, every moment. Your life, your death, your blood was shed for every moment, every moment. Above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me, above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me. Oh, Christ be all around me. Oh, 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 Christ be all around me.
Thank you, Daniel. Man, isn't Daniel such a blessing to FBC? If you think he's a blessing to us, go ahead and mash that like button for him, all right? He's not going to like that I just complimented him in front of everybody, but that's tough cookies, right? Thank you guys again so much for joining us. If you would, if you have a Bible where you are, Mark 14. Join me there, if you please, Mark 14. We're going to read verses 1 through 11. in Mark 14. And if you've been following us through our devotional, you'll see that this is the next natural place for us to go. Mark's Wednesday goes from 1 to 11. So let's go ahead and read Jesus' activity for Wednesday here in Mark 14. It says, "It was now 2 days before the Passover and the feast of the unleavened bread, and the chief priests and scribes were seeking how to arrest him," Jesus of course, "by stealth and kill him. For they said, not during the feast, lest there be an uproar from the people." Verse 3, "And while he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he was reclined at the table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly, and she broke the flask and poured it over his head. There were some who said to themselves indignantly, 'Why was the ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor.' And they scolded her. But Jesus said, 'Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing for me. For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. And truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her.'" Verse 10, "Then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money, and he sought an opportunity to betray him." Well, hopefully you've been following the videos for this Holy Week so far. And if you have, you'll remember on Monday, we had what theologians called a Markan sandwich. Do you remember that? Which was a story sandwich between two related stories. So there we had the temple incident sandwiched between the cursing of the fig tree and then the lesson about the fig tree. And in that incident, that Markan sandwich, we saw that Mark framed the stories like that because they interpret one another. Now, did you notice here we have another Markan sandwich? This time the stories don't interpret one another as much as they contrast one another. So if you look at your Bible, it's even has the headings that separate it. See how it's framed. We see there's a need for the traitor in verses 1 and 2. Then there's a story of an anonymous woman who sacrifices for Jesus in 3 through 9. And then we have Judas revealed as the traitor in 10 and 11. So the betrayal bookends this lady anointing Jesus with perfume. In other words, Mark places the best thing done for Jesus in between the worst thing done to Jesus. Not only was Jesus betrayed, he was betrayed by someone very close to them. Someone who he picked, who he taught, who he shared countless meals and laughter and hardships with. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a close friend. Like I think of when Julius Caesar was assassinated, and his best friend Brutus was among those plotting and stabbing him. And in Shakespeare's play, you've heard this, Julius Caesar, as he was being stabbed, he looks at Brutus and says, "Et tu, Brute," which is, "Even you, Brutus?" Because the betrayal was as bad as the stabbing. But this, of course, is 1,000 times worse than that. But Jesus knew that Judas was going to do that all along. He knew it when he chose Judas to be a disciple. He knew it at the Last Supper that we're going to look at tomorrow. And he knew it when Judas approaches at the Garden of Gethsemane on Friday. But you ever wondered why it was necessary for the religious leaders to recruit Judas to betray Jesus? Have you ever thought about that? Why not just arrest him if he's committed some kind of crime? Just arrest him. I think, for example, of countless passion plays or movies or skits where the crowds, maybe you could picture some, are portrayed as like bloodthirsty, who hate Jesus and want to see him killed. Now, if that was the case, why couldn't the high priest have arrested Jesus in broad daylight? Why the secrecy? Why does Mark tell us explicitly in 1 and 2 that they were trying to arrest him by stealth? Why, when they finally arrest him, do they do it at night in the Garden of Gethsemane? Well, because Mark has shown us all Holy Week that the crowds favored Jesus and the religious elite feared them. On Sunday, we're told the crowd spread their cloaks on the road as Jesus rode in, and they shouted these politically tinged words. You remember that he was the king come to save them. Then on Monday, when Jesus proclaimed the impending doom of the temple, we're told that the chief priests and scribes were seeking a way to destroy Jesus, but they feared him because all the crowd was astonished by his teaching. Then on Tuesday, yesterday, we're told in 1132 that the religious elite feared the crowds. In 1212 that they wanted to arrest Jesus but feared the people. Then in 1237, Mark says the people heard Jesus' teaching gladly. So they needed a way to seize Jesus under cover of darkness, and Judas was the man for the job since he was greedy and willing to turn on Jesus for a few denarii. But Mark interprets this depressing reality by taking us to a story of extravagant generosity. Here we have Jesus 2 days before his crucifixion, fellowshipping at Simon the leper's house, and this anonymous woman came to him with a flask of nard, broke the flask, poured the expensive perfume all over Jesus. Now, just as an aside, there is a similar story in the other Gospels where Mary, Lazarus' sister, does something similar. It's unlikely that this story in Mark is about Mary, and even if it were, if you're just reading Mark, think about if you're reading Mark, just have the Gospel of Mark and not the other Gospels, and you have no knowledge of the other Gospels, the lady presented is still anonymous. So she pours out nard, which came from a rare plant that is found only in India, and Mark gives the price of this at what? 300 denarii, which was nearly a year's wages for a day laborer. To give you some perspective, Mark mentions in 637 that 200 denarii would have been sufficient to feed 5,000 people. 200 denarii. You think about that. And this woman takes a sweet-smelling perfume worth 100 more denarii and pours it on Jesus. She publicly shows just how much Jesus meant to her. Then Mark tells us that the disciples were indignant and they rebuked her harshly. Now, the word there to describe their rebuking of her is a word that means snort or roar and was used of horses. So they scoff at her harshly, making an argument that this could be sold for a lot of money and given to the poor. Really, they demean both the woman and Jesus. I mean, did they not think Jesus was worth this kind of honor? Was this just too extravagant for Jesus? Did this cross some kind of line of what was sufficient to honor Jesus with? So Jesus tells them to leave her alone, and he says that the time to show him love and affection was short, and the opportunity would soon be gone. And then he makes 3 observations. Did you notice? Number 1, this woman has done what she could and held back nothing from him. 2, this was a prophetic and symbolic action that she may not have even realized because she has just anointed him for his impending death. And 3, her act will never be forgotten. What the reality of Judas' betrayal sandwiched around this amazing act by this woman does is show us what loyalty versus disloyalty looks like. Judas is willing to sacrifice Jesus to obtain material reward. The woman, on the other hand, seizes an opportunity to show love to Jesus, and she sacrifices a precious gift to honor him. She doesn't understand fully what she's done. She's anointed him for burial. Jesus knows death awaits him. Think about it. She anoints him with this sweet-smelling perfume from head to toe. When he goes into the tomb, he likely still smells of this perfume. She doesn't understand fully what she's done. She anointed him for burial. Jesus knows death awaits. And so should the disciples, since he's told them 1,000,000 times that he was going to die, but they still don't get it. But people will understand her actions better in the future, and Jesus shows that even though he is about to die, this is not tragedy, but good news. Because he says the gospel is going to go forth into the nations, well into the future, and her actions will be remembered. He's right, isn't he? You and I, 2,000 years later, are talking about her. But not only will faithful and loving actions towards Jesus not be forgotten, neither will acts of foul play, because we remember what Jesus did too, or Judas did as well. This text asks us some questions, doesn't it? It asks, who are you in this scene? Can we be like Judas and betray Jesus for some other gain? Can we be like the disciples who think at this time we can give Jesus too much? Or are we like this anonymous woman who doesn't think anything is too much to give to Jesus? The text also asks us, how much is too much devotion to Christ? What's too extravagant to give him? Jesus told them that the time to honor him was short. They would always have the poor to serve and take care of, and they should. But Jesus was 2 days away from death. The time to serve him was then. For us, we know we have a short time on this earth, and thus a short time to give honor to Jesus in this life. Are we doing what we can, willing to sacrifice anything in order to serve and honor and glorify him? And are we doing it publicly? Are we doing it no matter what it might cost us? And we aren't talking simply monetary here. That's what we think immediately about this text. The woman did something that was socially unacceptable in order to honor Jesus, and she did it publicly in front of everyone. This act of devotion and love was not simply her sacrificing an expensive flask and perfume. She was putting at stake her reputation, willing to absorb the scorn of these men, and she did it in front of everyone, which would leave no doubt where her loyalty lied. What about you? Is your affection for Jesus public to where there is no doubt where your allegiance lies? You know, many people in our day leave no doubt where their political allegiances lie. You just look at their words and their social media posts, you know exactly where they stand. But they make you wonder if their Christianity is moderate or casual or easy, and if it costs anything to them. There's no doubt whatsoever where this woman's devotion lies. There is no doubt that there is no price she is unwilling to pay to honor him. And there's no doubt Jesus has her allegiance above anything else. Shouldn't all that be true of us too? Shouldn't our devotion be public no matter if it costs us social standing or acclaim or friendships? Even if people look at us and think that's too much devotion, that's over the top allegiance. Are we willing to give anything for him and his glory and his fame regardless? This woman is remembered, and her actions toward Jesus are remembered, even though we don't know her name. Your loving and faithful actions toward Jesus will never be forgotten either. Even if your name remains anonymous to history, Jesus knows your name, and your sacrifices towards him will echo throughout eternity. Pouring a year's wages worth of perfume was indeed extravagant. But more extravagant than that was the blood of the perfect God-man poured out 2 days later for you and me. That's the most extravagant gift ever given to humanity, and he didn't think it was a waste or too high a price to purchase you. In light of that, can anything truly be too much to give to him? He's worth everything, isn't he? Money, time, acclaim, standing in culture, affiliations, allegiances. What could be too much to pour out for him when he poured out his blood for you and me? These are the things that Holy Wednesday calls for us to consider, and the questions it calls us to answer. How do you answer them? Let's contemplate these deep considerations this Holy Wednesday. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Make sure you tune in tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, Sunday at 10 a.m. live as well. Pastor Daniel's going to come up here, and he's going to sing us one more song in worship. Join us there. Like, comment, and share. Thank you again.
Rejoice, the Lord is King, your Lord and King. of death and hell unto our Jesus give. Lift up your heart, lift up your voice, rejoice again. I say rejoice in glorious hope. Jesus, the judge, shall come and take his servants up to their eternal home. Lift up your heart, lift up your voice, rejoice again. I say rejoice. Lift up your heart, lift up your voice, rejoice again. I say rejoice.
We'd like to thank you for joining our live stream on this Holy Wednesday. And if there's anything we can do for you, Pastor Sherry would love to do that for you. Reach out to us. Please let us know. We're just grateful for you. And if you have any questions, please put those in the comments as well. And continue to look. We have a YouTube channel. Look on there if you want to catch back up with some of Vaughn's teachings. It'll be on there. We have stuff provided on Facebook for kids. We have Zoom meetings and different things for students. But we'd love to continue to worship with you throughout this week, and especially on Easter Sunday as well. So please tune in then. We thank you for tuning in.
Good job, boy.